Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and welcome our next speaker on board, Mr. Ahmad Okbelbab. Well, Ahmad is formerly e-learning developer at Al Jazeera Media Network, a certified instructor by Apple, working since 2005 as an e-learning developer, instructional designer, online and face-to-face instructor on video editing and graphic designing at Sony in Saudi Arabia. He also has a profound experience in developing, designing, and delivering e-learning content. So let's go ahead and welcome Ahmad Okbelbab on board.
Well, thank you very much for this introduction, and I would like to welcome you all. I would like to share some experiences that I have seen through all of this e-learning career. I would like to talk about the constraints, about the challenges, not about the advantages. So today we would like to talk about semiotics and visual storytelling of online digital learning, how to overcome common challenges. I picked up some common challenges, 5 of it. They are definitely more. But let's talk about education on screen, disadvantages, and also we are going to talk about conceptual thinking, illusions, rhetoric of image, boring, visualized instructions, confusing, accessibility in digital learning, excluding. So with the first point, education on screen, disadvantages. One of the main disadvantages of digital learning is the feeling of solitude and limited feedback. How to deal with this? I personally, from my personal experience, I would suggest to make activities with between the educator and the educated people, so they are not in a passive learning situation. Feedback is very important. To encourage people to give their feedback and to listen to them and to really be aware of what kind of information they have received or understood. I encourage to go to competitions between the trainees or the students, so they have this feeling of being connected, the feeling of being questioned, the feeling of being important. Their ideas are important. They are not in a passive learning situation. So I would recommend competition. I would recommend questions and such activities. One of the other constraints in education on screen in general, the need for high self-motivation. People, when they sit alone and learning without having the feeling being real in a real group, in a conventional classroom, they most of the time are not very much motivated, and we have to deal with this emotions, being not high motivated. How to motivate people in our digital learning environment. One of the beautiful way to do this is by asking, of course, questions and making some kind of games, so people would be not only learning but would be also entertained. We have seen how people, young people and adults and even children, how they, when they are go to online gaming or go to digital games, they are completely concentrated. They are very motivated to complete the game. So gaming and education are very, very much related to aspects that we have to take into consideration to keep the motivation high. Another thing with constraints and disadvantages of education on screen is, of course, distraction. People get very easily distracted when they have a mobile, a cell phone, or a tablet, or any notification coming from anywhere. So to overcome this constraint, we should inform people to stop or hold any kind of notifications. This is very important. People should deactivate any kind of uh, um, information coming out of the class. They should also sit in a suitable room without any kind of audio or visual distractions to cope with online or digital learning class. Another thing or another disadvantage of education on the screen is the asynchronicity. Asynchronicity is a term describing being not uh, communicating with others at the same time. And this is happening if it is an offline learning digital medium. This is very obvious. And also it happens when people are in an online learning platform, because most of the time the educator cannot easily directly communicate with each of the students or the trainees, and also the trainees are a little bit not very much encouraged. They are not very much easy to communicate with the educator. They cannot comment easily, either because of technical issues, or they are not very much used to this kind of education. So asynchronicity is one of the main disadvantages of education on screen. And the last disadvantage I would like to talk about is cheating monitoring in assessments. This is a very difficult process, how to monitor people in assessments in online digital platform. It is possible through a different mechanism, but it's still not very easy like the conventional way of learning. The next point I would like to discuss is conceptual thinking and the illusions that are related to conceptual thinking. In digital learning, educators tend to conceptual thinking rather than to practical examples. And this conceptual thinking, it's of course one of the very important way of thinking, but it is very overwhelming in digital learning. So the result is more and more of lack of real life examples. We need to maintain real life examples in digital learning through videos, through slides. Real life examples are very important that we have to keep an eye on. And the other problem with conceptual thinking's illusions in digital learning is the passive learning. Passive learning is a term where the trainee or the student is just sitting and absorb information without making any efforts, just looking to the screen and listening to the educator without doing any further efforts. And this kind of learning is not the best way to learn things. We, as human, gather our experiences and information from practical examples, from practical experience. So we have, as educator, we have to maintain passive learning. We have to maintain active learning and not passive learning mechanism. Other disadvantage in digital learning is the passive thinking. People get information directly. It's similar to passive learning, but in passive thinking, people are not encouraged to critical thinking because of the constraints in communication between the educator and the trainees. So we have to think about critical thinking, how to encourage the people to think critically by, again, asking questions, put information in a way that as something that we are able to doubt about it, we are able to experiment it, we are able to think out of the box and look for other possibilities. So the opposite of passive thinking is critical thinking. We have to encourage people in digital learning to be more critical when they are dealing with learning content. Also, one of the disadvantages is the absence of brainstorming. Brainstorming is a way to think about anything out of the box by dealing with different people in a group. They discuss possibilities, they discuss possible solutions, they think about crazy things that seems to be crazy at the beginning. This is the way to encourage people to go ahead with brainstorming, which is a very important way of gathering information and learning. Brainstorming is one of the very important, essential elements in learning, and not being just passive thinker or passive learner. Also, one of the constraints is the neglecting of details, because people in digital media not always able to see details. And this is the next point that we are going to discuss, using infographic to deal with such details, using statistics, using videos. And let's talk about the next slide, which would be about the rhetoric of the image. One of the main problem of rhetoric of the image in digital learning is being boring. The feeling of being bored is very common, and to avoid this, to overcome this problem, to overcome this disadvantage, I would suggest, from my personal experience, to keep an eye and give very attention to the encoding and the decoding of the image. How and what do we mean by this image? What exactly do we mean by this image? And how to encode it and make it decodable in a proper way, in a way that people would understand the message that I would like to convey. After encoding it, they would decode it in the same way to understand my message. We have to give very importance and to make attention to encoding and decoding of our images in digital learning. And if we are talking about images, we cannot ignore, and I cannot emphasize enough the importance of semiotics, the science of signs, how to use signs and what they mean, how people understand these signs, how to choose signs, how to make it readable, understandable. Semiotics is a very important aspect in digital learning. And also, when we are talking about images, we need to consider cultural and personal constraints. These constraints should be studied and should be discussed and should be overcome. How to solve cultural and personal constraints in digital learning. Another point is color theory. When we are dealing with image, these images are most of the time not in black and white, they are in color. So we have to keep an eye and to make attention to the main aspects of color theory, what emotions are involved with these colors, and also to understand that some people have some medical problems with colors. So we have to avoid colors that are sometimes not recognizable by all kinds of people. Um, the other thing I would like to discuss is the condensing of information. In digital learning, it's very common that a lot of information are condensed in a very narrow screen or in a very limited time. The condensing of information resulted in a bigger problem that people would not understand the whole information. So we have to try to avoid the condensing of information. It should be not overwhelming. We have to tend to simplicity, so to avoid the condensing of information. And one of the main problem is with presentation, like the one we are using now. One of the problem with application like PowerPoint and Keynote and so on, people or educator, they tend to put a lot of information, a lot of lines, as if it was a book, as if it was a page of a book, and this is not suitable at all for presentation. We have to use very simple words, very short sentences, to give the people the possibility to understand what they are reading. This is not a book. This is not a page that people have in their hands and they can read it in all relaxed. So condensing of information is a very negative aspect that we have to avoid. And we have also to keep the education process in digital learning. We have to keep it entertaining as much as possible, so people are engaged and not just reading lines after lines after lines. This would be not beneficial at all. The other thing I would like to talk about is the visualized instruction. We tend to use instruction, of course, and visualized instructions are sometimes very confusing, because you, as an educator, put instructions, visualized instruction to explain something. So sometimes the instructions itself are more complicated than the content. So visualized instructions should be also simple and should be very easy to understand. And we have to do this by avoiding data overload. Keep things simple, keep things straightforward. Also statistical analysis. When people see some instruction, they need to make some statistical analysis sometimes, and these statistical analysis should be also straightforward, should be easy to understand, should be logical, should be common sense, and not something that is very complicated to understand in a digital learning medium. Again, complexity of visualized instructions. This complexity should be as low as possible. We are not a book. We don't give the people a book to read. We are in a digital medium to learn, which has its characters that we have to respect, to understand, to implement, to use, to apply. So avoiding complexity is one of the main issues in visualizing of instruction. Also, emotional conclusions and logical conclusions should be described and should be maintained. Emotional conclusions maybe more important sometimes than logical conclusions. And when I talk about emotional conclusions, I mean how to make people curious, how to support curiosity of the trainees and of the students how to maintain surprise and information that they were not able to see before. This aha effect, the aha effect is very important in visualizing of instructions. And next point, I would like to discuss also the logical conclusions. Uh, don't suppose that people would get the same conclusion that you have as an educator. You have to help them, you have to go with them or guide them to achieve the same logical conclusion that you have. Don't assume that the logical conclusions that you have are common sense. Avoid as much as possible that people would understand your logical conclusion. As a matter of fact, help people to go with you to the same logical conclusion that you achieve. The next point I would like to discuss, and the last point, this is the last point I would like to discuss with you, is accessibility in digital learning. So one of the main disadvantages is a feeling of excluding. People with disabilities have the impression they are excluded, and we have to overcome this feeling. Being excluded is a very negative feeling, is not acceptable at all in education in general, and not acceptable at all in digital learning as well. So we have to maintain cooperation with them, giving them the feeling that they belong to a group of disabled people and also non-disabled people. We have to maintain the communication between two groups. We don't need to give them the feeling that they are excluded. This is a very negative emotion that we have to overcome. We have to deal with it. Also communicating. People with disabilities, they have sometimes problems how to communicate because of the technology that they are using that is sometimes not suitable enough for people with disabilities. We have to take this into consideration. We have to think about other new, and we have to develop new technologies that help people with disabilities to communicate easily in both directions, how to express themselves easily, and how to understand other groups of people. This is something which is very important, and one of the ways is to use subtitling for deaf and hard of hearing people. Subtitling for deaf and hard of hearing people, SDH, is a very important aspect that we have to maintain, we have to develop, and also people that cannot see, or they have a problem with vision, with visual scenarios. We have to give them audio description of the educational content, audio description with comfortable voices, with professional audio recording, with suitable speed, and also with speed that they can change on their own when they are listening to the audio description of the educational content. This is also very essential. And at the end, we have also to give attention to word choices. People with disabilities sometimes do not get the meaning of words the way we get the meaning of the same word, because they have another way of seeing the whole world. So choosing the words is an essential way. We cannot talk about colors with people with disabilities in vision. If we are going to talk about colors, we have to find a way how to describe colors for blind people, for examples. When we are talking about shapes, or three-dimensional objects, we have to find models to people with disabilities in vision, or for blind people. Very important to discuss this with them, to develop this with them, to get feedback from them. Do they really comfortable with this digital educational content? What are their needs? What are their suggestions? We are not just helping them, we are also learning from them. And this is my presentation for this time. And thank you very much. And I hope you would enjoyed it. And I would like to discuss some of the questions you are interested in. Thank you very much. Is virtual, one of the questions, is virtual learning delivery likely to become mainstream and the preferred choice for higher education? It should be, and it is going to be, because if we are talking about conventional monitors, screen, they are at the end just 2D screens. Even if we put some 3D objects, it's still a 2D screen. So virtual learning is coming differently with VTR, with lenses and glasses that give you, as someone who is learning something, to look around himself and see object as if he is in a real life. Virtual reality is coming very soon in digital learning, definitely. Next question, please. Well, thank you very much for attending this presentation with me. I hope you enjoyed it, and keep in touch, and thank you very much.
It was a pleasure having you on our platform. Thank you for coming and sharing insights. I'm sure everybody is delighted to have you on board and to listen to your session. Thank you so much once again.